I, 26, F, never thought a Christmas toast could destroy everything I believed about my family. But when my father raised his glass to my brother that night and called him his successor, the sound of my mother's plate shattering against the floor was just the beginning of something much bigger than any of us realized. The dining room had been perfect just moments before. Red candles flickered on the table, casting warm shadows across the china my mother only brought out for special occasions. The smell of roasted turkey filled the air, mixing with the pine scent from the tree in the corner. Everything looked exactly like it should for a family Christmas dinner. But appearances can be deceiving, and I should have known something was coming when my father stood up with that particular gleam in his eye. My brother Marcus sat across from me, looking as relaxed as always in his designer sweater that probably cost more than I made in a week. He was 28, just 2 years older than me, but you'd think he was royalty the way my father treated him. While I'd been working 70-hour weeks at the family company since I graduated college, Marcus had been traveling the world, posting pictures from beaches and mountains, living off the trust fund our grandfather had left him. My mother sat at the other end of the table, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore the pearl necklace my father had given her for their 30th anniversary last year, and her silver hair was pulled back in an elegant bun. She looked calm, but I noticed the way her fingers tightened slightly when my father cleared his throat to speak. "Before we eat," my father said, his voice carrying that commanding tone he used in board meetings, "I want to make an announcement." I straightened in my chair, my heart suddenly beating faster. This was it. After 4 years of proving myself, after landing the Morrison contract just last week that would bring in millions to the company, he was finally going to acknowledge my work. Maybe even announce my promotion to vice president, the position I'd been working towards since I started. "This family," he continued, looking around the table, "has built something extraordinary. 3 generations louder than the crash itself." "Oh," my mother said, her voice steady despite what had just happened. "How clumsy of me." My father's jaw tightened. "Helen, really, must you make such a scene?" "A scene?" She stood slowly, her movements deliberate. "No, Richard. This is not a scene. This is merely an accident. You want to talk about scenes? Let's talk about what you just did." "What I did was announce the future of our company," he said, his tone warning her to stop. But my mother didn't stop. She never did when she was truly angry, and I could see it in her eyes now. That cold fury she usually kept hidden beneath perfect manners and polite smiles. "Without discussing it with anyone?" she said. "Without considering the person who has actually been running your company while you play golf with your friends?" She was talking about me. My throat felt tight, and I realized I was gripping my fork so hard my knuckles had turned white. Marcus laughed. Actually laughed, taking a sip of his wine. "Come on, Mom. We all knew this was coming. Dad's been grooming me for this my whole life." "Grooming you?" I said, finding my voice at last. "When? Between your trip to Bali and your meditation retreat in Tibet? Or was it during the 6 months you spent finding yourself in Europe while I was closing the biggest deals our company has ever seen?" "Watch your tone," my father said, pointing his finger at me. "Your brother has the natural leadership qualities this company needs. You're good at what you do, sweetheart, but being good at paperwork doesn't make you a leader." Paperwork. 4 years of blood, sweat, and tears, and he called it paperwork. "The Morrison contract," I said, my voice shaking. 8 months of negotiations, $30 million in guaranteed revenue. I did that. Me. While Marcus was posting Instagram stories from yacht parties. "The Morrison contract was a team effort," my father said dismissively. "And frankly, I had to step in at the end to close it properly." Watching a mask fall away. "Tell me, Marcus, do you even know what our debt ratio was before your sister restructured our financing? Do you know what EBITDA stands for? Can you read a balance sheet?" "I don't need to know those details," Marcus said, recovering his confidence. "That's what we have people for. Leadership is about vision, about relationships. Dad knows that. Your father knows nothing," my mother said, and my father's face turned red. "That's enough, Helen. You're embarrassing yourself." "No, Richard. You're embarrassing yourself. And you're destroying this family in the process." She turned to me and her eyes softened. "Come with me, dear. We need to talk." I stood up, my legs feeling shaky. Marcus rolled his eyes. "Oh, here we go," he said. "The dramatic exit." Very mature. I stopped and looked at him, really looked at him. His perfect hair, his perfect smile, his perfect life that had been handed to him on a silver platter. "You know what, Marcus?" I said. "Enjoy it while it lasts." He smirked. "Is that supposed to be a threat?" "No," I said. "It's a promise." I followed my mother out of the dining room, leaving my father and brother sitting at the table surrounded by broken china and splattered gravy. Behind us, I heard my father mutter something about women being too emotional for business. It took everything I had not to turn around and throw my own plate at his head. My mother led me to her study, a room I rarely entered. It was her private space, filled with books and papers and a desk that was surprisingly cluttered for someone who appeared so put together. She closed the door behind us and locked it. "Sit," she said, gesturing to a leather chair across from her desk. I sat, still shaking with anger and hurt and disbelief. She went to a cabinet and pulled out a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. "I don't usually drink," I said. "Tonight you do." She poured 2 generous servings and handed me one. "We have a lot."
You, I said. Me, she confirmed. And I've documented everything. Every questionable decision, every borderline illegal transaction, every time he used company funds for personal expenses. She tapped the folder. "It's all here. Why didn't you ever say anything?" "Because I was waiting," she said. "Waiting for the right moment. And also because I hoped, foolishly perhaps, that he would do the right thing. That he would recognize your worth, your contribution. But men like your father, they only see what they want to see. And Marcus?" Her expression hardened. "Your brother has been skimming from the company for years. Small amounts, nothing too noticeable. But it adds up. He's been funding his lifestyle with embezzled money. And your father has been covering for him." My stomach turned. "You have proof? Bank statements, altered invoices, a very interesting paper trail that leads to some offshore accounts." She took another sip of whiskey. "Your father thought he was being clever, hiding it all. But he forgot that I have access to everything. I'm the one who set up the accounting systems in the first place." I felt like the world was tilting on its axis. Everything I thought I knew about my family was crumbling. "What do we do?" I asked. "We give them enough rope to hang themselves," she said. "There's a board meeting next month. The annual shareholders presentation. Your father is planning to formally announce Marcus as his successor there. But if you have all this evidence, why wait?" "Because timing is everything," she said. "Right now it would be a family squabble. He said, she said. But at the shareholders meeting, with all the investors present, with the media there, that's when we strike." "What do you need me to do?" "Keep working. Act normal. Let your father and brother think they've won." She leaned forward. "But also, start documenting everything. Every interaction, every decision they make. We're going to need a clear pattern of behavior. This is Scandal and keep their stock prices from plummeting," she said. "And with what we're going to reveal, they'll be begging for stable leadership." A knock on the door interrupted us. My father's voice came through, impatient and demanding. "Helen, open this door. We need to talk about your behavior." My mother finished her whiskey in one swallow. "Coming, dear," she called sweetly. Then, to me, quieter. "Remember, not a word. Let them think they've won." She unlocked the door and opened it. My father stood there, his face still flushed with anger. "What were you thinking?" he demanded. "Making a scene like that in front of Marcus?" "I apologize," my mother said calmly. "It was inappropriate. I'll clean up the mess." He blinked, clearly not expecting her to give in so easily. "Well, good. That's good. In fact," she continued, "I think we should have a proper celebration for Marcus. Perhaps at the shareholders' meeting? Make it official?" My father's chest puffed out with pride. "That's exactly what I was planning. I'm glad you've come to your senses." "Oh, I've definitely come to my senses,"
she said, and only I caught the double meaning in her words. The next few weeks were torture. I went to work every day, sitting in meetings with my father and Marcus as they made plans for the transition. Marcus had started coming to the office, though he spent most of his time in my father's office, laughing at private jokes and making decisions about things he didn't understand. I documented everything. Every conversation, every email, every decision. My mother was right. They were getting sloppy, overconfident. Marcus openly talked about his plans to modernize the company, which seemed to mostly involve firing long-term employees and bringing in his friends for executive positions. "We need fresh blood," he said during one meeting, not even looking at me. "People who understand the future, not the past. The Morrison contract is our future," I pointed out, "and the relationships I've built with our existing clients." Those relationships just nodded along, accepting credit for work he'd never done, ideas he'd never had. My mother played her part perfectly. She organized a celebration dinner for Marcus, invited all the right people, and smiled graciously as my father boasted about his son's accomplishments. She even bought Marcus an expensive watch for the future CEO. But at night, we worked. We compiled evidence, cross-referenced documents, and built an airtight case. The corruption went deeper than either of us had initially thought. It wasn't just embezzlement. There were kickbacks from suppliers, inflated expense reports, and even some instances of insider trading. "How did I not see this?" I asked one night, staring at a spreadsheet that clearly showed funds being diverted. "Because you were focused on actually running the business," my mother said, "and because they were careful to keep you away from certain accounts. Notice how your father always handled the Henderson account personally. The Henderson account, our biggest client, worth millions annually. I'd always wondered why my father kept such tight control over it." "What about Henderson?" I asked. "Henderson Construction is owned by your father's college roommate," she said. "They've been overcharging us for services and splitting the difference. It's been going on for 15 years. That's fraud," I said. "Yes," she agreed. "It is." The night before the shareholders' meeting, I couldn't sleep. Everything was in place. My mother had contacted a forensic accountant to verify our findings, and we'd prepared a presentation that would expose everything. We'd even alerted a few key board members, the ones my mother trusted, to be prepared for some shocking revelations. I stood at my apartment window, looking out at the city lights, and thought about what was about to happen. By tomorrow night, my father and brother would be ruined. The company would be in chaos. Everything would change. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Remember, arrive separately. Act surprised." I deleted the message immediately. The next morning, I dressed carefully. Professional, but not.
My mother arrived separately, wearing a black dress that made her look like she was attending a funeral. She sat in the front row, the picture of a supportive wife. The meeting began with the usual formalities: financial reports, projections, the standard corporate speak that everyone pretended to care about. Then my father stood up for his special announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice booming through the microphone. "Today marks a historic moment for our company. For 30 years, I've had the privilege of leading this organization, of building it from a small family business into the powerhouse it is today." Scattered applause filled the room. I kept my hands in my lap. "But every leader must think about the future," he continued, "about succession, about legacy. And I'm proud to announce that I've found the perfect person to carry our company forward into the next generation." He paused for dramatic effect, and I saw my mother shift slightly in her seat. "My son, Marcus, will be taking over as CEO, effective immediately." The applause was louder this time, though I noticed several board members exchanging confused glances. They hadn't been consulted about this decision. Marcus stood up, waving to the crowd with that practiced smile of his. He moved to the microphone, and I could see he had prepared remarks, probably written by someone else. "Thank you, Dad," he said. "I'm honored to accept this responsibility. I promise to bring fresh ideas and new energy to this company. Together, we'll reach heights you've never imagined." That's when my mother stood up. "Excuse me,"
she said, her voice cutting through the applause. I have a question. The room fell silent. My father's smile froze on his face. Helen, he said tightly, perhaps we can discuss any questions after the meeting. Oh, I think the shareholders would be interested in this question, she said, walking toward the stage. It's about the Henderson account. I saw the color drain from my father's face. What about the Henderson account?
Assistant, confirming that she was asked to create false invoices. She kept copies of everything. The board members were reading the documents, their expressions growing more shocked by the second. Robert Chen stood up. Richard, is this true? It's a misunderstanding, my father said desperately. Helen doesn't understand how business works. I understand perfectly, my mother said. I also understand embezzlement, which is what Marcus has been doing for the past 3 years. Marcus, who had been standing frozen at the microphone, suddenly came to life. That's a lie, he shouted. You can't prove anything. Can't I? My mother pulled out more documents. Transfers to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Luxury purchases charged to company credit cards and hidden in operational expenses. That yacht you posted pictures from last month? The company paid for it, listed as client entertainment. The room erupted. Shareholders were shouting questions, board members were demanding answers, and reporters were frantically taking notes. This was no longer a succession announcement. It was a full-blown scandal. You need to leave, my father said to my mother, his voice low and dangerous. Now. I'm a shareholder, she said calmly. I have every right to be here. Robert Chen banged his gavel, trying to restore order. This meeting is suspended, he announced. The board will convene an emergency session immediately. Wait, I said, standing up. Everyone turned to look at me. I walked toward the stage, my heart pounding but my steps steady. There's more, I said. My father's eyes widened as he recognized what I was holding, my own folder, containing everything I'd documented over the past weeks. The Morrison contract, I said, addressing the board directly. I negotiated and closed that deal entirely on my own. I have emails proving my father was out of the country at the time, despite his claims that he stepped in to finalize it. Shut up. The company and would be facing criminal charges for embezzlement. The FBI would be notified about the fraud involving Henderson Construction. As we left the boardroom, my father grabbed my arm. You've destroyed everything, he said, his voice broken. Everything I built. No, I said, pulling free. You destroyed it yourself. I'm just cleaning up the mess. Marcus was waiting in the hallway, his perfect composure finally shattered. You think you've won? He said to me. You think the board will give you the company? You're nobody. You're just the daughter who got lucky. We'll see, I said. 2 weeks later, I stood in the same boardroom where everything had fallen apart. But this time, I was there for a different reason. After extensive review, Robert Chen said, the board has made its decision regarding new leadership for the company. I held my breath. The evidence presented shows that Ms. Davidson has been effectively running this company's operations for the past 4 years. Her client relationships are strong, her financial acumen is proven, and she has the respect of the employees. Therefore, we are appointing her as interim CEO, with a review for permanent position in 6 months. I felt my mother's hand squeeze mine under the table. Thank you, I said, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside me. I won't let you down. After the meeting, I stood in what used to be my father's office, looking out at the city skyline. The nameplate on the desk still bore his name, but that would change tomorrow. My mother knocked and entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. How does it feel? She asked. Surreal, I admitted. Like I'm waiting for someone to tell me it's all a mistake. It's not a mistake, she said. You earned this. Not through manipulation or fraud, but through actual work. What about you? I asked. The board offered you a position too. She smiled. I'm retiring. I've spent 30 years cleaning up your father's messes. It's time I lived for myself. And Dad? Marcus? Her expression hardened slightly. Days are ahead of us. I outlined my vision. Transparency,
accountability, and growth through ethical practices. No more backdoor deals, no more nepotism. Promotions would be based on merit, and every employee would have a clear path for advancement. The corruption that plagued this company ends now, I said. We're starting fresh, and we're doing it right. The applause was genuine this time, not the polite golf claps my father used to receive. These people believed in the change I was promising because they'd seen me work alongside them for years. After the meeting, Jennifer, one of our senior managers, approached me. "I just wanted to say," she said, "we all knew you were the one really running things. Your father might have had the title, but you had our respect. That meant more to me than any board appointment." 6 months passed quickly. The company not only survived the scandal but thrived under new leadership. We landed 3 major contracts, expanded into 2 new markets, and our stock price reached an all-time high. The board made my position permanent without hesitation. I was reviewing quarterly reports when my assistant knocked on my door. "There's someone here to see you," she said, looking uncomfortable. "Your brother." I hadn't seen Marcus since the day everything exploded. Part of me wanted to refuse, to have security escort him out, but curiosity won. "Send him in," I said. He looked different. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a simple off-the-rack suit. The perfect hair was slightly unkempt, and there were lines on his face I'd never seen before. "Hello, sis," he said, trying for his old casual tone but not quite managing it. "Marcus, what do you want?" "I need a job," he said, the words clearly painful for him to say. "Dubai didn't work out. No one will hire me in the States because of the scandal. I'm broke. And you came to me? I know I don't deserve it," he said, and for the first time in his life, he actually looked humble. "I know what I did was wrong, but you're my sister." Surprised. "You'd do that for me?" "I'm doing it because everyone deserves a second chance," I said. "But Marcus, if you screw this up, if you try any of your old tricks, you're on your own. Permanently." "I won't," he said quickly. "I promise." I wrote down the contact information and handed it to him. "Thank you," he said, and I think he actually meant it. After he left, I thought about the long journey that had brought me here. The betrayal, the anger, the careful planning with my mother. We'd destroyed my father's empire of lies and built something better in its place. My father never reached out. His pride wouldn't allow it. Last I heard, he was living in a small apartment in Florida, his assets seized to pay fines and restitution. The man who once commanded rooms now spent his days alone, with only his bitterness for company. My mother, on the other hand, was thriving. She'd bought a house in France, started taking art classes, and was even dating a nice widower she'd met at a wine tasting. She called me weekly, and I could hear the happiness in her voice that had been missing for so many years. "Any regrets?" she asked during one of our calls. "No," I said honestly. Everything happened exactly as it needed to. The company continued to grow under my leadership. We expanded internationally, doubled our workforce, and became known as one of the most ethical corporations in our industry. Business schools wrote case studies about our transformation. But the real satisfaction came from smaller moments, like when I promoted Jennifer to vice president, the position I'd once coveted, or when we implemented a program to help employees get advanced degrees, fully funded by the company, or when I received a letter from a young woman who said I'd inspired her to stand up to discrimination in her own workplace. These were the victories that mattered, not the revenge, though I'd be lying if I said the revenge hadn't been sweet. One day, about a year after taking over, I was having lunch with a potential client when he said everything. My father had raised his glass to his successor that night. He just hadn't realized he was toasting his own downfall. The company was stronger now than it had ever been under my father's leadership. We'd cleared out the corruption, the nepotism, the toxic culture he'd cultivated. In its place, we'd built something real, something valuable. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Saw the Forbes article. So proud of you." Forbes had just published their 40 under 40 list, and I'd made the top 10. The article mentioned the scandal, of course, but focused on how I'd transformed the company afterward. They called me a corporate phoenix, rising from the ashes of corruption. Marcus had kept the job I'd helped him get. His boss reported that he was actually working hard, showing up on time, and had even contributed some good ideas. Maybe he really had learned something, or maybe he just had no other choice. Either way, he was earning his paycheck for the first time in his life. I pulled up the company financial reports on my computer. Revenue was up 40%. Employee satisfaction was at an all-time high. We'd just been certified as a B Corporation, recognizing our commitment to social and environmental responsibility. None of this would have happened if my father had gotten his way. The company would have continued its slow decline under Marcus's incompetent leadership, hemorrhaging money through corruption and poor decisions, until there was nothing left. In trying to preserve his legacy, my father had nearly destroyed it. In the end, it was the people he'd dismissed and overlooked who saved it. The irony wasn't lost on me. My father had spent so much time and energy grooming Marcus, believing that success was something that could be inherited rather than earned. He'd ignored the person who was actually doing the work, who understood the business, who cared about more than just the title. A knock on my door interrupted my thoughts. Jennifer entered with a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. "What's this for?" I asked.
Skipped. Had I done something wrong? The board is extremely impressed, he continued, and I relaxed. So impressed, in fact, that we want to discuss expansion. We're considering acquiring Brennan Industries. Brennan Industries. They were 3 times our size, a major player in the market. It would be a massive undertaking. That's ambitious, I said carefully. It is, he agreed. But we believe you're capable of handling it. The question is, do you? I thought about it for a moment. A year ago, I would have doubted myself, would have wondered if I was ready. But I'd proven myself over and over again. I'd saved this company, transformed it, made it profitable and ethical. Yes, I said firmly. I do. The acquisition took 6 months of intense negotiations, but we pulled it off. The business media called it the deal of the decade. A relatively small company, led by a 27-year-old CEO, had successfully acquired a corporation 3 times its size. The day the deal closed, I received a letter. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. My father's. I almost threw it away unread, but curiosity won. Inside was a single paragraph. "You may have won the company, but you've lost your family. I hope it was worth it. You've become everything I never wanted in a daughter. Cold, calculating, ruthless. Congratulations on becoming just like me." I read it twice, then laughed. He still didn't get it. I wasn't like him at all. I'd built my success on hard work and integrity, not lies and corruption. I'd earned my position, not inherited it. And I hadn't lost my family. I'd cut out the toxic parts to save what was worth keeping. I filed the letter away and forgot about it. I had more important things to focus on. The combined company was now one of the largest in our industry. We had thousands of employees, offices in 12 countries, and endless opportunities for growth. But with great power came great feels different, better than having it handed to you. That's quite a revelation, I said. I was an ass, he said bluntly, for most of my life. Dad enabled it, encouraged it even. But that's not an excuse. I should have seen what was right in front of me, that you were better at this than I could ever be. And now? Now I'm trying to be better, to actually deserve the opportunities I get. He paused. I'm also testifying. Testifying? In Dad's case, the prosecution reached out. They want me to confirm some of the financial irregularities. I'm going to do it. I was surprised. He's still your father. He's a criminal, Marcus said simply. And it's time I stopped protecting him. The trial was a media circus. My father, once one of the most respected businessmen in the city, now sat in a courtroom as witness after witness detailed his crimes. Marcus's testimony was particularly damaging, as he could confirm conversations and transactions that my mother and I hadn't been privy to.
My father was found guilty on all counts. The judge, citing the severity and duration of the fraud, sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison. He'd be 75 when he got out, his legacy completely destroyed. I didn't attend the sentencing. There was nothing left to say, no closure to be found. He'd made his choices, and now he was facing the consequences. My mother did attend, sitting in the back row with sunglasses and a hat. She told me later that she needed to see it end, to watch the man who'd controlled and manipulated her for 30 years finally face justice. "How did it feel?" I asked her. "Like freedom," she said simply. The company's 5th year under my leadership was our best yet. We went public, with an IPO that exceeded all expectations. I rang the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange, thinking about how my father had always dreamed of this moment, just not with me at the helm. We were now worth over $1 billion. The same company that had been on the brink of bankruptcy when I'd taken over was now the talented women who'd been overlooked, underestimated, dismissed. We were changing that. One hire at a time, one promotion at a time. That night, I had dinner with my mother at her apartment. She'd returned from France for the IPO celebration, looking tan and happy. "I'm proud of you," she said, raising her wine glass. "Not just for the success, but for how you've achieved it. You could have become bitter, vindictive. Instead, you became better." "I had a good teacher," I said, clinking my glass against hers. "Oh, darling, I just showed you where the bodies were buried. You're the one who built something new on top of them." We laughed, and it felt good. The anger and hurt from that Christmas dinner 5 years ago had faded, replaced by something stronger. The satisfaction of having survived, thrived, and triumphed. "Any regrets?" she asked, echoing our old question. "Just one," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "I wish Grandma could have seen this. She would have loved watching us take down the patriarchy, one spreadsheet at a time." My mother's eyes misted. She would have, but somehow, I think she knows. The next day brought another surprise. A delegation from the Business Roundtable wanted to nominate me for their board, the youngest person ever considered for the position. It would put me in rooms with the CEOs of the largest companies in America, influencing policy and practices across industries. "We need voices like yours," the chairman told me. "People who understand that ethical business isn't just good PR, it's good business." I accepted, knowing it would mean even more responsibility, more scrutiny, but also more opportunity to create change. The announcement made headlines. From betrayed daughter to business leader, the remarkable rise of CEO who transformed family scandal into corporate success. I got hundreds of messages, from other women in business, from employees, from strangers who'd followed the story from the beginning. But the one that surprised me most came from Jay. Former friends had abandoned him, his reputation was destroyed, and his legacy was one of corruption and failure. Sometimes I wondered if he thought about that Christmas toast, if he realized that moment had been the beginning of his end. He'd been so confident, so sure that he held all the power. He'd never imagined that the women he'd dismissed could bring him down. But we had, completely and utterly. The week before Christmas, I held a town hall for all employees. We'd grown so much that we had to stream it to our offices worldwide. 5 years ago, I began, this company was dying. Corruption was eating it from the inside, and the leadership was more interested in preserving power than creating value. Today, we're one of the most successful and ethical companies in our industry. Applause filled the auditorium. But we're not done, I continued. Success isn't just about profits, it's about impact. It's about creating opportunities for people who've been overlooked. It's about proving that doing the right thing is also the smart thing. I announced our new initiatives, a program to hire formerly incarcerated individuals, partnerships with community colleges to create pathways to corporate careers, and a commitment to achieving carbon neutrality within 3 years. "This is what leadership looks like," I said. "Not inheritance, not entitlement, but service. We're successful because we've earned it, and we'll stay successful by continuing to earn it every day." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. That Christmas, My mother and I had dinner at my penthouse apartment. Just the two of us, with good wine and better conversation. No family drama, no power plays, no broken plates. Remember 5 years ago? She said as we sat by the fireplace. That horrible dinner. How could I forget? It changed everything. Your father called it a toast to his successor, she said with a wry smile. He had no idea he was really toasting you. We clinked glasses, and I thought about the journey that had brought us here. The investigation, the revelations.
Somewhere out there, in a federal prison, my father was spending another Christmas behind bars. I wondered if he thought about us, about what he'd lost. But mostly, I thought about what we'd gained. Not just the company or the money or the success, but the freedom. The freedom to be valued for our abilities, not our chromosomes. The freedom to build something ethical and sustainable. The freedom to prove that the old ways of doing business, the corruption, the nepotism, the discrimination, were not just wrong, but ineffective. My assistant had left a report on my desk about our year-end numbers. Revenue was up another 30%. Employee satisfaction was at 92%. We'd won awards for innovation, for corporate responsibility, for being one of the best places to work. None of this would have happened if my father had succeeded in his plan. Marcus would have run the company into the ground within 2 years if the fraud charges hadn't destroyed it first. Instead, his betrayal had been the catalyst for something extraordinary. I picked up the photo on my desk, my mother and me at the IPO, ringing the opening bell together. We were both smiling, genuinely happy, free from the toxic dynamics that had once defined our family. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Robert Chen. "I know it's Christmas," he said, "but I wanted to be the first to tell you. The board met in emergency session today. We're promoting you to chairman and CEO. You'll be the youngest person to hold both titles in a Fortune 500 company." I sat down, overwhelmed. "Thank you," I managed. "I'm honored. You've earned it," he said simply. "The board has complete confidence in your leadership. Oh, and one more thing. Your compensation package will make you one of the highest-paid executives in the industry. Merry Christmas." After he hung up, I sat in the quiet of my office processing this news. Chairman and CEO. The titles my father had clung to so desperately, had schemed and corrupted himself to maintain. Billion-dollar company. I thought about everyone who'd ever been overlooked, underestimated, or betrayed by those who were supposed to support them. Our story was proof that justice was possible, that merit could triumph over nepotism, that sometimes the underdog doesn't just survive, they thrive. My father had toasted his successor that night 5 years ago. He'd raised his glass to Marcus, never imagining that the real successor was sitting across the table, documenting his crimes and planning his downfall. The irony was perfect. In trying to deny me my rightful place, he'd actually created the circumstances that led to my complete victory. His betrayal had freed me from any obligation to protect him, any hesitation about taking what I'd earned. The broken plate had been just the beginning. What followed was a complete shattering of the old order, the corrupt system my father had built and protected. And from those shattered pieces, we'd built something new, something better, something that would last. I thought about the young women entering business school now, reading about our story in their case studies. They'd learned that success wasn't just about working hard. It was about refusing to accept less than you deserved, about documenting everything, about having allies who kept receipts. They'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't just living well. It's taking everything your betrayers valued and making it better than they ever could have imagined. My phone buzzed with another message. This one was from Sarah Chen, the young finance employee who'd approached me at the company event. "Just saw the news about your promotion. You're proof that the system can change. Thank you for showing us the way." I smiled, thinking about all the Sarahs who would come after her, who would enter a business world that was a little more fair, a little more merit-based, because we'd refused to accept the status quo. The city lights sparkled below, each one representing a life, a story, a possibility.
Somewhere among them were other daughters being overlooked, other mothers keeping quiet, other families where talent was too long. My father's legacy would be one of corruption and failure, a cautionary tale told in business schools about the dangers of hubris and fraud. But from the ashes of his empire, we'd built something that would last for generations. The plate my mother dropped that Christmas dinner had shattered into 100 pieces, impossible to put back together. But we hadn't tried to repair it. Instead, we'd swept away the broken pieces and set a whole new table, one where everyone who'd earned it got a seat. 5 years ago, my father had raised his glass to toast his successor, certain he was securing his legacy through his chosen heir. He'd never imagined that he was actually toasting the beginning of his end, the moment when the women he'd underestimated began planning his downfall. Now, as I stood at the pinnacle of success he'd tried to deny me, I thought about that toast one more time. He'd been right about one thing. He had been naming his successor that night. He just hadn't known it was me. The irony was delicious, as sweet as the revenge we'd served ice cold. Every success I achieved, every milestone the company reached, was a reminder of what he'd thrown away for the sake of his misguided pride and sexism. But the best part wasn't the revenge. It was the future we'd built, the opportunities we'd created, the lives we'd changed. That was the real victory. Not just tearing down the corrupt system, but building something better in its place. As midnight approached on that Christmas night, marking exactly 5 years since everything changed, I made my own toast. Not to destruction or revenge, but to justice, to merit, to everyone who'd been told they weren't enough and proved the world wrong. The champagne was perfect, crisp and cold, just like the revenge we'd served. But unlike revenge, which leaves a bitter aftertaste, this success was sweet all the way through. Because it wasn't just about winning, it was about deserving to win. My father thought he was preserving his legacy that night. Instead, he'd destroyed it with his own hands.